pilots in the Navy and people with high government clearances, these are reputable people. If you don't trust those guys, who are you supposed to trust? Because they're there fighting for your life, representing you. Just to relate this to golf, the past couple of years have been a little bit challenging for me on the golf course, and it's made me have to question a lot of the things that I've done. Have you had conversations with a Mick West or something like these debunkers or skeptics?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah. When you see anomalies and you just go, we don't know, but it's probably something we already know. We just can't quite explain it right now.
Yeah.
It's like that way of thinking is anti-progress in a way. Whoever's working on these projects, is it just because they don't have a good enough understanding themselves, or is the truth just too jarring that they can't release it?
The following is a conversation with Viktor Hovland. Viktor is a professional cup-winning golfer, hailing from Oslo, Norway, and now out in the USA. Viktor has rapidly ascended the ranks of professional golf since turning pro in 2019. Notably, he became the first Norwegian to win on both the PGA and European Tours, with victories including the 2020 Puerto Rico Open and the 2021 BMW International Open. Beyond his impressive achievements on the course, Viktor has a keen interest in mysteries of the universe, particularly UFOs and UAP. He's clearly a deep thinker, as well as being an incredible athlete. I also hear Viktor has exceptional taste in music, with a passion for metal and rock genres. So he's a welcome friend on the UAP Files podcast. Viktor has a huge following as an athlete, and it's wonderful to see people with such a large following prepared to talk openly about the UAP subject, indicating to me, at least, that the stigma is falling away. This was a fun conversation about UFOs, whistleblowers, government secrecy, debunkers, and a little bit about golf, of course. So, the following is a conversation with Viktor Hovland. Viktor, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate your time. It's awesome speaking to you, genuinely, and it's a really unusual thing, because I see you quite a bit on my screen and when I'm sort of scrolling through, and I saw today that multiple different articles where golf and then aliens and afterlife, and I was like, oh, hang on, here's a guy that's like at the top of his game, who's sort of prepared to talk about some of these really quite spicy subjects. I mean, not for me, but for a lot of other people. Where did that come from? We were right sort of jumping into how did you get into the subject? What sort of sparked that?
Yeah, it's kind of been on my peripheries for a while. And whenever the Pentagon leaked the Tic Tac videos and similar things like that, I heard about it, but I never gave it much interest. I never really looked into it. And ever since I've always been into Joe Rogan's podcast, and then he had Bob Lazar on. I listened to that interview many years after it came out. And then obviously Ryan Graves came out, Commander David Fravor. So it's like things just kept popping up, and I thought, man, I just have to give this a chance and look into it. And it's doesn't matter, depending on the veracity of the claims. It's like, if it's true, it's insanely fascinating. And I think if you're not interested or fascinated, and potentially the implications of those things being true, I mean, if you don't find that fascinating, then what do you find interesting? So ever since then, I've definitely gone a little deeper into it and trying to learn more about it. But I'm by no means up to your level or some of the other guys within the UFO space. But I'm just trying to learn as much as possible.
Yeah. So would you say that perhaps around the sort of, so 2017 was when the New York Times article came out with the sort of Pentagon, secret UFO team that were investigating. Did you have an interest prior to that in sort of childhood, or is it something that's really just come about from 2017?
Yeah, I mean, I would say even later than that. I'd say probably 21, 22 is when I really started looking more into it. So it's quite a recent thing.
Wow.
But yeah, I've just never had any supernatural experiences or anything. I grew up and I listened to Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, a lot of just a lot of atheism versus religion debates, and I thought I had a very materialistic view on the world. And when you start to just think about things in a slightly different way, I think you expand the possibilities or the potential possibilities of what's possible. And uh, thinking about how big the universe is, it's like, I mean, there has to be aliens or whatever you want to call them out there. Now, the question of if they visited Earth or not, that's a different story. But that there's life out there, I mean, that seems very plausible. Yeah, and just kind of gone from there.
Wow. Do you, I mean, at your level, so you're, I mean, you're, let's face it, you're like a megastar. And if you've got you must have like people that kind of look after your image a bit. And see, for me, I'm thinking like I'm just one dude. I can say whatever I want. It doesn't matter, you know.
Yeah.
But for you, I'm thinking like sponsorship and, you know, the sort of image that goes with it. Is that something that you sort of think about? You just think, I'm open and sort of wear my heart on my sleeve kind of guy. How do you think
Yeah.
about it all?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have people obviously telling me, hey, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to say. But I think it's implicit a little bit that there are certain guidelines that you're supposed to follow. As a professional golfer, you answer, yeah, I played really well today. I hit fairways and greens and two putted, and it's just boring. And if I whatever get some flack from even entertaining this topic, it's like that's fine. If people have an issue with that, I don't really care because I think objectively speaking, whether some of the claims that are being made out there, if they're objectively correct or not, okay, let's discuss it. But there are some interesting claims being made, and let's just look into the veracity of it. Like and if you're not interested in that, like going back to what I said earlier, what are you interested in? This is potentially one of the biggest things that are happening in our lives right now. So let's investigate it. And if I pay a price for talking about that, then I couldn't really care less, to be honest.
No, I mean that's wonderful. It's such a great sort of perspective and way of thinking about it, and it's great to see. I think it's like an indication that things are really moving in the right direction because I mean, I'm constantly engaged in this subject, so I'm really kind of
Yeah.
deep into who's talking about it, who's interested in it, what sort of people are kind of jumping into subjects, and who it's sparked interest in. And I think it's a great sign that the stigma's kind of going and melting away, I guess, that more and more people are prepared to come forward and talk about it. And I see it a lot in the videos that I put out on the Instagram and stuff, and you see some of the people that kind of like this stuff, think, oh, that's interesting. So that person's interested, and that person is, and all of these different fields, like real top level
Mm.
people in their field. And it's great to see. It really is. Yeah.
So how did you get into this topic? How long you been making videos for?
Yeah, so I've probably I've been making videos about 3 years.
Okay.
Podcasts, this is like season three podcast, so I guess year three technically. I mean, I've had a vague interest since childhood, but I think it's sort of similar to yourself in that it was around the stuff coming out from New York Times, so I was probably a little bit earlier with the sort of 2017. But in terms of actually getting deep into it and making videos and researching and talking to people, probably around about the same time, that you sort of found the subject interesting and started looking into it.
Mm.
So
And
yeah,
when you first got into it, were you all in from the start because of past experiences that you've had, or was it from a very skeptical point of view, and then you just wanted to understand more and dig into it?
yeah, yeah. I was. That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think that I probably came into it as a bit of a 50-50. I came into it thinking something is happening, there's something going on. And you don't get intelligence officers, top level military people and politicians saying, look, there's something going on, unless
Mm.
there is something going on. And I think when I first came into it, I probably thought maybe this is some secret technology that the government's working on that's incredible and a new leap in technology, some sort of new propulsion system or something like that. That was my thought. And then I started talking to more and more people that just had experiences, super credible people, film stars, and directors and musicians and everyday, nurses and doctors. And they'd had these experiences that you just couldn't be a secret military, bit of tech. And they'd seen it with their family, their whole family, and they still remember it years later. And I don't believe in sort of group psychosis. I don't think that's a thing.
Mm,
So at that point, I'm thinking, okay, so maybe there is some secret tech out there from the government that they're developing, but also I think maybe there's something that we perhaps can't quite understand that we haven't that maybe maybe somewhere in the deep halls of the intel community they might have a bit more of an understanding, but something that we can't quite understand, but that communicates in some way or we can see in some way. I still haven't figured out what my
mm.
opinion is yet.
When you start from that point of view, and then obviously been doing this for 3 years, where has it led you to? I mean, what are you kind of prepared to take a stand
Yeah.
on, or is it still, because that's what's frustrating with this whole thing? It's the more and more people you ask or speak to, the problem or the issue just becomes more and more complicated. You almost know less than you did
Yeah.
from the beginning, and it's just so frustrating.
Yeah. That's exactly how I feel. It's so frustrating. And you're completely right. You get further away from, or you feel like you're getting further away from understanding, because it's really easy when you get in. If you go, okay, there is something and it's non-human, so therefore extraterrestrials, they're coming from somewhere very, very far away. That's quite a simple
Mm,
concept to understand. And then you get into the realms of like, okay, interdimensional, they've always been here. And you think, okay, I've got to try and wrap my head around that as a
yeah.
possibility. And then there's the other possibilities of, ancient civilizations. There's time travel, and then you've got the other option, which is like everything. That it's all real. And then the simulation that Elon Musk talks about. And
Mm,
so I don't know. I mean, I'm still on the fence. Yeah, it gets
yeah.
more and more and more difficult the more you research it. And I think the easiest way for me to understand it is in probability terms, in my mind, not scientifically probability, but just the way I look at it, it's probably a bit of everything because
Mm,
it's so complex that it's probably a bit of everything. That's what makes sense to me, is that it probably is extraterrestrial, it probably is interdimensional or crypto terrestrial or a simulation or time travel from, because there's all sorts of things that match, all sorts of things that make sense. People say, well, why have they got lights on? If they're so advanced, why have they got lights? Well, if they're, time travelers, they were from here originally, then maybe that's part of it. And some say that they wear
mm,
like a uniform that's similar to a military uniform. Well, why do they do that? Well, that could fall into the, time travel, but equally interdimensional. Why are people seeing things? Is it linked to this afterlife thing, or is it linked to ghosts? Is that a connection there? Is it actually
yeah.
ghosts? I mean,
Like a
it's
religious perspective on it as well.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
good and evil, angels, demons, all
yeah.
that viewpoint of it as well. It's like, yeah, you just get further and further in the weeds. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, but it's fascinating to think about because you have to really question everything that you've thought about before. And just to relate this to golf, the past couple of years have been a little bit challenging for me on the golf course, and you've it's made me have to question a lot of the things that I've done, because when you make an instinctual move that I've done for, I'd say, maybe the past 10 years of my life, and the ball is going one direction, it's going pretty straight, it's going where I want it to go, and then suddenly it's not doing that. um, you have to really question everything and look at all the things that you're doing to re-engineer the golf swing that you had before. And when you do that, it's quite addicting, really. It might give you some short-term discomfort because you look at things that you have regard as facts, and then maybe they weren't as true as you thought they were. And that original discomfort goes away quickly when you realize that on the other side there's lessons to be learned and you can actually improve because of that. And then when you extrapolate that to other things in society or how you live your life in general, it's quite freeing. And it almost becomes a little addicting. You just want to question everything. Although within reason, you don't want to go, you still need to put on your shoes and put on clothes and go out there and work and get better at the things you want to get better at. But yeah, it's just fascinating. So that's kind of what led me to this topic for sure.
Interesting. So you've not had an experience yourself. You've not had a sighting or anything like that.
No, not
No.
at all. I'd love to, but I can't I can't say I have. So
Yeah. See, now
but
I'm.
as you said, it's fascinating to listen to, pilots in the Navy and people with high government clearances. These are reputable people. If you don't trust those guys, who are you supposed to trust? Because they're there fighting for your life, representing you. So it's yeah, I don't know what to make of it, but it certainly makes you a lot more open-minded to what's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've spoken to lots of pilots, airline pilots especially behind the scenes. Not many of them are
Mm,
sort of prepared to come on camera and talk about it, but lots of them will. I've had a couple that have, but I'll get sent videos from people that I feel free to share this, but I don't want my name sort of tagged at the moment. That kind of a comment, I get that quite a lot of people that see really unique things in the sky, and some things just like, look, dude,
mm.
this isn't a Starlink. I don't know what this is, but it's and I get those kind of comments. It's really, really fascinating to see and listen to these people's experiences.
Have you had like conversations with a Mick West or something like
Yeah,
these debunkers or
yeah.
skeptics?
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I interviewed Mick West, so I did a
Oh, you did.
podcast. Yeah, I did a podcast in season one, I think it was. We had a conversation, and it was okay. I mean, I like Mick West's way of communicating, in that he's pretty respectful and he's calm,
Yeah.
and I like that. And but I feel like he does come from a position of resolution and then work backwards, and I don't think that's that useful. I think it's sort of he works on probability. In my opinion, he is based on probability, which is fine. You can look at that from a scientific perspective, but if you're not prepared to consider that we don't know everything, then and it can only be resolved as something that we know, then you're always going to resolve it as human, prosaic, conventional. You're never going to be
Mm.
able to resolve it as something else. And I think, there's lots of examples throughout history where we thought we knew everything, and then we realized that, oh, actually, the Earth's round, and, there's micro life, and, there's all sorts of things that we discovered that we didn't realize were a thing and were possible. And I
You
think,
don't, and yeah, you don't get there by having
yeah,
when you see anomalies and you just go, we don't know, but it's probably something we already know. We just can't quite
yeah,
explain it right now.
yeah,
It's like that way of thinking is anti-progress in a way.
100%.
Even though I'm sure a lot of those explanations will explain a lot of anomalies that we currently see today, but that it explains all of them, I'm quite skeptical to that. And it's just not that fun. It's just not that interesting. Let's get some crazy theories on this and experiment and see if it works or not. And if
Yeah,
it's not correct, then all right, let's try something else. It's
100%. Yeah, no,
that's how it should be.
100%, completely agree. And I think that's part of the issue. Is I've had a few, because I put a lot of videos out and people send me stuff and I put it out. And then, so Mick West's got I don't know if you're aware, he's got like a forum called Metabunk, which is a lot of sort of skeptics and debunkers will come together and they'll look at cases and then analyze it and always resolve it. I think always resolve them as prosaic or, human made. And so
Mm.
they look at a lot of mine. And I think one of my most recent videos that I put out yesterday, day before, they were working on that because it was like a two-part. So the first part came out about a month before. And it was a case with this guy that had some footage, like an old VHS from 25 years ago. So he took 3 days worth of footage of a UFO over his garden and phoned the police, phoned the Royal Air Force in the UK. Nothing really came of it. He'd made a report, but then he just filed it away for 25 years. And
Wow.
then he saw my YouTube and said, like you guys, I trust you guys. Do you want this video? So he went down and filmed him and digitized the footage, and we got it enhanced and stuff like that. And then, Metabunk guys got involved. And it's definitely Venus. It's this, it's that. And I held back a bit of footage which sort of disproves the Venus. I kind of knew it was going to go there, but
I
disproves
love
that.
it.
Yeah, it sort of disproved that possibility because there was 58 minutes where the object was still in the sky and you could kind of see a roof pitch, and Venus would have moved sort of 15 degrees, 14.5 degrees in that time frame. So it was like it's not possible to be Venus anyway. So that was a bit of fun, but it just when you look through how they analyze stuff, it's very much it's quite easy because if you think about like we've got 10,000 roughly, I don't know, Starlink and other satellites in the sky. You've got all the planets. You've got all the aircraft. I don't know, maybe another 10,000's worth of aircraft in the sky in any one day across the world. So wherever you look in the sky, there's going to be something conventional in pretty much that direction. And so if you have to resolve it as conventional, then you can easily say, well, Venus was up there, or well, Starlink was up there, and then it's done. And
Mm,
you disregard, and in a lot of cases that is true, and that's probably what it is. But in the cases where you've got a witness that's a really credible person that says, well, actually, I saw it zigzag across the sky and then shoot off and then stop over there. Well, Starlink doesn't do that. And
mm,
then you have to disregard their testimony and say, well, they're not credible then, or they don't know what they're talking about.
yeah,
And I think that's where we sort of fall apart. And I hold a lot more weight in
yeah.
witness testimony, especially really credible people. So
Which in to play devil's advocate, and I'm sure like you can see that a lot in witness testimony is that people do get things wrong when they just experience something and they have to relay the information of what they just saw. It is oftentimes wrong. So like you can bear that in mind and say, okay, yeah, it might be wrong, but there's been so many people who say similar things. So the if we're going by probability, the probability of all of them being wrong and seeing something that's incorrect, I would find that's probably not very likely either. So it's yeah, I agree with you.
yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, really good point. And it goes back centuries, isn't it? If you look at some of the art and stuff and flying saucers and
Mm,
orb-shaped objects going back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in artwork and it's in biblical texts. And so I think, yeah, when you've got that many, you've got this massive weight, sort of mountain of witnesses that are all saying the same sort of thing, and it'll match a huge chunk of them. It does feel as if you've got to take that on board. You've got to say, actually, we can look at this one case on its own merits, but it matches up with all of these other ones that go back
yeah.
hundreds of years, and kind of go from that point and look at it from a scientific perspective. Have you heard about Soul Foundation and Galileo Project, people like those guys?
I've heard of Galileo Project. That's what's his name again? Avi Loeb, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Who does that? Yeah, that's fascinating. He obviously has a very seemingly at least a very neutral point of view on this. He's like, look, I just want to figure this out, so we'll just set up some satellites or whatever it is he does, and let's figure it out. Because what was his deal again? He kind of discovered that Oumuamua or something that was a potential alien artifact from
yeah,
somewhere in the universe.
yeah.
I can't
I
quite
don't know if,
remember.
yeah, I don't know if much came from that. I remember it was in the press quite a bit at the time, and they thought it was interstellar. Um, but yeah, I know that. So they had a project to recover what they thought were parts of a interstellar object or a meteorite of some type,
Mm,
and recovered some little beads, some balls, basically some real small parts. Pretty incredible considering that they've gone, figured out exactly where it was that it hit the ocean, and they went and sort of dredged the ocean's floor and recovered some of these samples.
oh wow.
Um, I can't remember what the update was. I don't think I'm not sure if they've got like a final or they're going to do a paper on it. I'm not sure, but yeah, they're still working really hard on they've obviously all the sensors in the sky and they're integrating AI so they can sort of take away the conventional stuff and that's a drone or that's a bird and
Okay.
it's sort of sorting what's anomalous to what's not, which is really, really interesting. And there's a guy, Ezra Kelderman, who's the project manager. So he sort of runs the day-to-day stuff. Real cool guy. I talk to him quite frequently and he's yeah, hopefully. I mean, what they're trying to do is that real scientific. Like, even if they had something, they would want to peer review it. They'd want to get the sort of put their papers in order really before they can come out and say, "Look, we are certain that this is what this is." And I'm not suggesting I've got a scoop and that they've told me that from Ezra. I'm just that's kind of the concept is if they get something, then that's the plan. I think is that it has to be rock solid because otherwise, if
Yeah.
they get one thing wrong, then everything they say in the future is going to be, oh yeah, you've
Mm.
wrong
And they're
about
not going to interpret their own data. They want that out
yeah
there for everyone to see, and then they can reach the same conclusion. Yeah,
yeah.
that's cool. I hope something comes out of it.
Yeah, me too. But I think it's great. Conversations like this is what is going to get people looking up more, I think, and get people collecting that data. And
Mm.
there will be people that will go out and say, well, look, I'm normally sort of stargazing or I'm really into astrophotography or whatever. And actually I'm going to really focus on this. And there's people going out buying infrared and sonar device, all sorts of different bits of technology because they're interested. And it really
Mm.
collects that data, which is great. It's really great.
Yeah, because the thing is, I mean, even I'd say above average interested in this stuff, but I hardly ever look up at the sky, you know. And if you're living in a city, there's light pollution. When it gets dark, I'm inside. I'm doing other things. So there's not that you don't have that much time to just sit outside and look for this stuff. And obviously, if you're not seeking out your content or similar content, you don't really hear about it at all, except for that Washington Post article in 2017. And then Dave Grush was obviously testifying for Congress, little things like that. But then it all just kind of goes away. So, yeah, I don't know. And this the CE5 app, because I watched Stephen Greer's documentary. Have you messed around with that, or have you had other people that
So.
can speak on that, or what are your thoughts there?
So I mean, I haven't tried it. I haven't tried it. I've got a friend who does it a lot. A guy called Tom Vernon. He's got his own YouTube channel, Tom Vernon UAP, and I mean, he doesn't use the app, but he sort of has that similar sort of process, and we've talked about it quite a
The
bit.
technique.
Yeah, that sort of thing. I guess ultimately it's like just getting yourself into a zone, really focusing on I guess your breathing. It's meditation, that kind of thing,
Mm.
and just positive thinking. And we've had lots of conversations about this and about like the more time you spend on this sort of subject, it seems to then I don't know how to explain it really. You're more lucky. Let's put it that way. You get more
Mm.
lucky, and so I've only had one sighting that I could say is quite extraordinary,
Okay,
and
cool.
that happened to be after a mammoth podcast. Like I can't remember, it was two or three podcasts in a row, but it was hours and hours of interviews with different people in one day. And I'd finished at 1 o'clock in the morning. And my last interview was a guy called Jack Sarfati, who, if you, I don't know if you know him, but he's a
Sounds familiar, but I don't
yeah.
know.
He's a theoretical physicist who worked on Project Stargate project, so for the CIA.
Okay, so he's an
Um,
older guy, isn't he?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and he's an interesting character. Let's put it that way. He says what he thinks, and he's got no filter. So he's quite entertaining. But it was it was deep, real deep conversation. And we'd finished that obviously talking about UFOs. He thinks that he could make it if he was given the money, I guess, to be able to build something like that. And he says he's figured out how the tic tac moves and all sorts of things like that. So real deep stuff. And I'd gone out that evening to take my dogs out, for sort of a final, go to the toilet in the garden and I'm off to bed sort of thing. And I'm looking up, and I always sort of have a couple of minutes looking up when I before I go to bed. And I just saw this object. I was looking at the stars. It was a real clear night, and this object looked like a star but slightly brighter, and just went from a completely static position to just shooting across the sky, stopping, and then just pulsing once, and then shooting off again. And I'm thinking, like, I'm in my head, I'm thinking, well, that's got to be conventional. So what can do that? And I'm trying to go through the list of things of what could do that, and I'm like, I can't. And it was really bright, and I can't think of what could do that. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I think I might have seen something. And I was talking to my friend Tom about that afterwards, and he was like, well, maybe it was their way of saying, you're doing well, or you're on the right road, or
Keep,
thank you, or
keep it
something like that. I'm
going.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
just it was really strange. And I'm not 100%. I can't say for certain that it's not something conventional, but I couldn't figure out what it was, and it felt very strange, very, very
Mm.
strange.
Did you have like an internal emotion while you were experiencing this, or was it just okay, wow, that's a weird light that's doing funny things, or
Yeah, I don't know. I've still not been able to really process how I felt. I didn't. It felt strange. I didn't feel normal, but then it didn't feel really profound, if that makes sense. So I wasn't sitting
mm,
there thinking like this has really changed me. It was more my brain went into right, figure out what's happening right now, figure out what this is, what could it be, try and assess it, quickly get your phone out. And so all of that stuff's happening in a real short space of
yeah,
time. And by the time I have got my phone out and realized I should probably
it's
try and get
gone.
this on,
Yeah.
yeah, it was gone. So I don't know. But it's one of those things that the more you, I think, and this is in my experience of talking to people, the more you think about it, the more you engage in the subject, the luckier you get in seeing things and having experiences one way or another. Um,
Mm,
so I don't know. I mean, it might be that, the more you think about it, you might actually spot something, and who knows? Who knows? It could be tonight, It could be
yeah.
hopefully not when you're taking that shot, that really important shot, something sort of
Yeah,
flies
not during
overhead.
the golf course,
No,
please. I'll have to
no.
tell the aliens just save it for when I'm stargazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You definitely don't want that.
No,
Definitely.
that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. We'll
What's
see.
uh, uh, who's kind of the or what top episodes have you done where you really left thinking, man, this was maybe the most comprehensive episode or information that you've heard about the whole topic? Because this just seems like you're getting bits and pieces from different guests, and there aren't that many people that kind of lay it all out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need to be somewhat wary of those people as well, because that might be, when you're too secure or too confident in in what you're saying. It's like, okay, well, how do you know?
Mm.
Um, but it was really fascinating. Like, it just for me was when I listened to Jake Barber, who came out and had the Ross Coulthart interview, and even with Jesse Michaels did a long form interview there. That I Man, that was really cool, because the way he laid it all out was very comprehensive and extremely persuasive, I found. But again, it's hard for us just regular people to know how much is true and how much is not. But it was very fascinating. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any thoughts like
Yeah,
similar.
I felt the same when I'm desperate for somebody to come out and just lay everything on the line, say this is how everything works, and put all the pieces together. Because you're right, it does feel like we're sort of getting little piece, like a little puzzle pieces, but then there's like a big, huge piece missing over here and a big piece missing over here, and you just want that one person to come out and say, look, I've been involved and I know exactly what this is, and these are my credentials.
Yeah.
And I guess we kind of had that a bit with David Grush to an extent. When
Yeah.
he came out, he gave us a hell of a lot more, but there's still pieces that he couldn't talk about that were classified and
And
all
it's
that sort of
tough when
stuff.
he hasn't directly
Yeah.
seen those things, Not to say that he's dishonest or anything, because I find him quite credible. But it's different when you, for example, hear Jake Barber saying he's handled these crafts himself, first person. So that's very interesting. Yeah, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's you just want more.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think I say this quite frequently, like if you take a step back and you look at where we are now compared to a year or two ago, you have got people that, we because before we got David Grush and, he wasn't a first-hand witness, although he says he's first-hand to some stuff, but in terms of like hands-on craft, he wasn't a first-hand witness. And then we said, okay, we just need a first-hand witness. And then we've got Jake Barber who says he is a first-hand witness, and we have other people that say that they are first-hand witnesses to being at locations when things happened. For example, somebody I interviewed just only a week or two ago, Jason Sands, who's an interesting character. I know some people are sort of question his credibility. He was on Joe Rogan not that long ago, talking about his case. He'd stated that he'd been a couple of feet
Okay,
away
I think
from
I remember that one. Yeah, yeah.
essentially like almost like a grey alien, I guess, but wearing like a military uniform, and that he'd seen. So all sorts of people are out there, and you're right, it's difficult to know exactly who you can trust and who you can't. But I think you just have to take the information and see if it adds up with other things. But you asked like in terms of a really good comprehensive interview or person I've spoken to. I think from like an insider perspective, it's really hard, really, really hard
Mm,
to get that from somebody. I think a really good person is probably someone like Professor Gary Nolan, because
mm.
he's had that sort of dip in both worlds of the intelligence world where he's kind of worked with them a bit and helped them a bit, but also he's really interested in talking about the subject, and I think he's had sort of experiences in his past as well. So he's got
Yep.
all of those sort of layers of things that you want from somebody that's they're interested in it. They're pretty open about what they think and what they know. But also they've got that side of them that actually they've seen behind the curtain, and they've got a bit more that they could give. So yeah, I mean, so Ezra Kelderman, who is on the Galileo project, I've interviewed him twice now, and he gives information about how to capture like really good data and stuff like that. So he was a great person to talk to, not so much in sort of knowledge about what might be going on or what might be the, you know, what might be out there. Not so much that, but more on the technical side of people that are interested how to,
Scientific point of view.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, how to capture really good data and assess that. He was great. I don't know. It's hard, isn't it? It's hard. They all add little pieces to the puzzle, and and like we said at the very beginning of this, it doesn't get you any closer, really.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't. But I think that's part of the fun. It's the pursuit, you know. Like, I often ask this question? I'll ask you if it's okay. Is like, what would happen if we got like disclosure? The government came out and said, right, guys, this is what's happening. This is what we know. There is non-human intelligence out there. It's extraterrestrial or whatever. It's real. We know it for a fact. We've recovered a couple of crafts. We can't show you because we don't want another country to get the technology. We want military superiority. What would day two look like? How do you think that would impact us, if at all?
Mm.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I just remembered a Jake Barber interview, and he answered that question, which I thought it was a beautiful way of putting it. It's like, yes, you will probably have an initial ontological shock when people are presented with that, but as you give it more time and maybe linger on the implications there, it should maybe give relief instead. Ontological relief is that we are actually a part of something bigger out there. And um, if those potential aliens that are visiting us, if they were evil, then you know uh, they could probably destroy us in a heartbeat if that's what they wanted it to. So if there is something out there, and if they want to help us, that could potentially give a lot of meaning to a lot of people, because there is a suicide pandemic out there in the world. People really struggle, and people have a hard time getting up in the morning and finding a purpose and living a meaningful life. So I think that could definitely aid in that, because we're just kind of wandering around on a planet, and most people are just working a job they don't want to do just to have enough money to pay to put food on the table. It's like that's tough. But if there's something more out there, I mean, that's how cool is that? I just think it's fascinating. But I do think there's probably going to be some societal complications because of that initially. But long term, I think it would be exciting times for sure. We're used to watching science fiction movies, and I think most people watch that because it's interesting. It's fascinating to think about what potentially could be out there. And yeah, I mean, the saying that truth is stranger than fiction, I mean, I do tend to think that that is the case. So why not?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think it's all of those things. I think we can never really know, and it really depends on to what extent the information to it really depends on what we're told, I guess. If we're told, look, we're some sort of prison planet and it's some horrible situation where our souls are being farmed. I mean, this is
Yep.
these are some of the some of the suggestions that are floating about. But I think, as you say, it's if they wanted us harmed in some way, they've had millions of years, thousands of years, certainly for our civilization to be able to do that, and they haven't. And most signs seem to point to if you believe this, then and you believe the cases that are out there, and the stories that are out there, which seem to be, pay a real interest in our technology and our nuclear sort of nuclear growth and are sort of protecting Earth one way or another, then actually it's sort of doing that, perhaps not getting too involved, but want to help in some way. So it's quite positive. But I
Mm,
think any pursuit of something different, exciting, a mystery is great because life can be mundane, you know,
yep.
and there's that massive sense of like what happens after we die, and that's a big thing. Even if people don't talk about it, I think that's in a lot of people's minds is what happens after we die, and that
Mm,
could potentially help to answer some of those questions, and that might bring peace to some people, certainly people that have had lost loved ones, that sort of thing.
yeah.
So, it could have all sorts of positives. Equally, people could say, I don't believe it, and then just go back to work and sort of forget about it. Go, I don't believe, President Trump, or I don't believe my prime minister, or whatever. Um, so I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? It's so hard to know. I hope for the positive side of it. I hope for, world peace and all that sort of stuff.
Do you think that's because obviously there's a lot of people saying that disclosure is coming soon and it's right around the corner. Do you think that is if there is a wealth of kind of information that they want to release to the public? Do you think that is potentially the reason why they hold that back, or is it just because they don't really know themselves, like the government or whoever's working on these projects? Is it just because they don't have a good enough understanding themselves, or
Yeah, see.
is the truth just too jarring that they can't release it?
So I've bounced around on my opinion on this. I think I started off thinking it's probably because of just purely because of military superiority. Like we want the best weapons, so
Mm,
we're a bit ahead on the technology. Other nations might have some of this technology, and therefore we don't want to tell the public what we know because then they'll find out over there. So that's why we keep it secret. But then I've heard some things and had my opinion changed slightly in that it could be that some of the technology that's been recovered, if we believe that some technology has been recovered, has been passed to a very select few military subcontract type
mm.
companies, Northrop Grumman,
Lockheed
Boeing,
Martin,
Lockheed
etc.
Martin,
Yeah.
yeah. And as a result of that, they've done very well in the stock price, and they've done very well. And other companies have fallen out and gone bankrupt, and that could open billions, if not trillions, of dollars worth of lawsuits and legal issues and all sorts of things like that. Where they hang on a minute, they got a step up, we didn't get that. That's not how procurement's supposed to work. So that could be part of the issue as well. It could be a bit of both, or equally, it could just be look, America's supposed to be the most powerful nation in the world, and if we say, look, there's stuff in our skies that we can't do anything about,
We lose
then
face. Yeah.
yeah, then you lose that sort of we're the best, we're the most powerful, we've got the best military, we've got the best air force, the best protection, and we can look after you, and so keep paying your taxes because we're looking after you. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, you can't look
So
after us, and
so there's almost this Mexican standoff
yeah.
where no, we know exactly what's going on, and then everyone's just kind of waiting to see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be that, or equally, it could just be they haven't got a clue. They haven't got
Yep.
a clue what's going on, and they think something's going on. Maybe they've picked up some weird stuff, and they, they 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 don't want to say that. Say it's better to say, look, we know some stuff, but we're top secret, so we can't.
Yeah.
Rather than say, yeah, we really don't know because we're not that
Because
good at collecting.
just to that point, you mentioned Boeing, and obviously they've been over the last few years been in the media a lot and had some controversies. I mean, their planes are just falling apart, and it seems like they're cutting corners to whatever artificially pump up the stock price, whatever the reason is. Um, but if they have government contracts and they are privy to some of these technologies, it's like, shouldn't it be really easy for them to just run the best company of all time and have no problems? So it's like, how can they have this um, like advantage to the
Yeah.
rest of their competitors and still yet struggle to make good airplanes? You know,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure they still do, but not as good as they used to be. How can both of those things be true? Their standards are lowering, but at the same time, they have government contracts and they have a huge advantage. It's like that seems to contradict itself. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
I
it's a
just
good
don't
point.
know.
No, it's a really, really good point. Yeah, it's a great point. And if they've got this technology or parts of the technology, why haven't we seen it? Why haven't they benefited financially from it that we're aware of?
Yeah,
And they, they haven't, as far as we know, particularly got anything that's much, much better than their competitors in terms of tech. So it's a good point. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, it could be that stuff's still being developed. It could be that stuff was developed and they were ahead of the game. There's arguments about stealth back in, when that was sort of developed initially, that maybe that was reverse engineered from something. There's talk of, same thing with silicone being back engineered from
mm,
way back when. The same with fiber optics and all sorts of
hmm.
sort of suggestions and theories and stuff that what could have been back engineered on what we've just created ourselves and figured out. I don't know.
So it's just on a maybe a longer time scale.
Yeah.
Is that, the problems that are happening with Boeing, just to use that as an example,
Mm.
that's like that's just a little intermediate noise, and then but then over time they're gonna maybe
Yeah.
slowly release some of that stuff and have that technological advantage, so that
Yeah.
over time, longer time scale, they're not really under threat. But
Yeah.
that could be, yeah, that
I
makes
think so. I
sense.
think I think that seems to be the main theory, I guess, is that it's that, and it's just a slower process, and and even if they're just giving a very small part, and there's a lot of talk of compartmentalization, excuse me, of some of the technology and the different sort of divisions that are looking at stuff, and that's how they keep it secret because not everybody knows what they're working on, and they're just told, right,
Yeah,
you're working on this, you can develop that, but they haven't got the full picture, and they don't realize actually, or might not necessarily realize that it's non-human technology that they're working on. They just think they've been given something from the CIA that they've been developing, and you guys can have this now, or whatever. But that would still cause major issues if they were still given something and those other guys weren't, and they went out of business. And now you've got, okay, well they've made 5 trillion on their stock price since then, so we want some of that. So massive lawsuit, that could be financial instability. So there, all of that stuff is plausible, I guess. I don't know if we'll ever know. You know,
yeah,
I mean, I think that's the hope. That's why these hearings that are coming soon, and the sort of transparency stuff, and David Grush, and is, I guess, to get some of those answers. We want we want some of the mystery explained, I guess, and maybe that's part of it. You know, I hope so.
yeah,
You do.
yeah. It seems crazy just that yeah, these hearings are happening and we want answers, but um and I've been watching like Jesse Michael's show a lot. I think his videos and documentaries are really just high production and they very in depth. But that is kind of crazy that it seems like he's and other peers of his and yourself are kind of on the forefront of this. Shouldn't there be something
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit bigger that are pursuing these answers? You'd like to think so instead of it just, yeah, I don't know how else
You,
to
no,
display.
no,
No
you're right.
offense to
No,
you
no, no,
guys,
no.
but
You make a really good point. I think it all comes down to money and finances, and I think when when it becomes profitable for the bigger organizations, the bigger publications, when it becomes profitable to them, or they realize that actually there's a real big interest in this, I think then they'll be jumping into the space, and then they'll be investigating, and they'll be talking about it, and I think we're probably going to see more of that. We saw that with the 60 Minutes thing with the drones and Jersey drones and stuff.
mm,
And so, people are taking it up, and it's as the stigma reduces and people are taking it more seriously. And then, people like Professor Nolan, the
yeah,
Soul Foundation, which is making it much more academic and scientific, and that's trying to bring that academic sorry, the sort of academia into the subject, and people can talk about it more. People like yourself who have got, huge following, and your audience will go, okay, well, if Victor's prepared to talk about this, and this guy's prepared to talk about it, and that guy's prepared to talk about it, then why can't I talk about it? It's a common subject now we can all discuss. And I think as time goes on, that's really going to improve, and they will take it up. And I am seeing it. I'm seeing it much more now than a year ago, and much more a year ago than 2 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
But perhaps it's just because I'm really focused on it, and I see it perhaps more
That's
than
probably a part of it
others.
too. But yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. It's becoming more and more popular for sure. Um, yeah, but then you can question, is that on purpose or not? Are we
Yeah.
being led
Yeah.
to
It can.
believe certain things that aren't true? Or yeah, it just the more complicated it gets, it's harder to narrow down on something tangible. But I certainly hope we're inching towards some larger conclusion of some sort.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too, man. Me too. Look, Victor, I'm really conscious of your time. I'm hugely appreciative of it. It's been fantastic talking to you, man, and
Yeah, thanks for
really
the
good
chat.
meeting you.
This is yeah, I mean, I don't know anything, so for me it's just interesting to chat to someone that is deeply entrenched in all this stuff and ask questions. I think that's just a treat for me. So thanks for reaching out.
Awesome, man. Really, really cool. Awesome. Well, look, stay in touch. And if you do happen to see anything, or if you had any more sort of insights or whatever, let me know, man. And let's stay in
Yeah, I
touch.
will. Sounds good. Thank you,
Awesome.
Jimmy.
Nice one. Take care, Victor.